Over the last couple months, both Mrs. Sticks and I have been playing through quite a large variety of different MMOs, both new and old. And I have since come to the conclusion that what I believed at one point was the perfect MMO is now a little bit outdated. So with this in mind, today I wanted to go ahead and talk about that very topic, the perfect MMORPG. Does it exist? What does it look like? What does it consist of? Before I go into that though, I want you guys to take a minute here and go down into the comment section below and let me know what you think would make the perfect MMORPG. Make sure you are elaborate, make sure you are descriptive. Developers watch the comment sections of videos like this, so your opinions, your thoughts here could very well shape the future of the MMORPG genre. Now, when I was younger, the MMOs that I would look for were all PvPvE games. I think that the younger generation currently also gravitates towards that very same type of competitive gaming that I did years ago, which is why games like Fortnite and Fall Guys and Overwatch and Counter-Strike are all as actively played as they are today. There was just something satisfying about grinding through the game with the sole purpose of being stronger than any of the other players, and then dominating them so completely, so absolutely that everyone on the server knew who you were. But maybe that was just me, as I've always had a bit of an ego problem, I guess. Mrs. Sticks can tell you all about that if you guys want her to. However, these days I don't really have the same drive, which could be due to the fact that I've just outgrown that type of competitive play. Maybe it's because I just no longer have the time to really invest in the games, or because in several of the games that I played, I actually hit the top of the ladder and it just didn't really end up meaning much to me ultimately. Either way, I've come to learn that PvP, which was once a very, very large driving force behind whatever I would play as an MMO, is much less of a concern to me now. It's an afterthought. I'm more than happy playing MMOs with or without PvP. I mean, I've played Final Fantasy XIV for years now and only played the PvP like 2, maybe 3 times. Yet in World of Warcraft, I have got War Mode enabled and am more than happy fighting any horde I see. I'm sure you've all noticed the large shift in the type of MMOs being made these days though, right? They're less about the journey and they're more about the destination. The destination in question being endgame. The world seems to matter less to developers, crafting a world that players can slowly explore, slowly learn about, the lore, the history behind everything and everyone. What we're given now is a rush to hit max levels so we can participate in the endless loop that is endgame grinding. Dungeons, raids, new gear. I completely understand the need for vertical progression in MMOs, I do. It's what the entire genre is built upon after all, but back in the 2000s, even during the early 2010s, MMOs used to take substantially longer to complete. You'd spend hours grinding for that single level up. You'd start a zone and you would remain in that zone doing side quests, continuing the main story, grouping up with other players to tackle content to make it easier, to make it quicker. An example of this here is Terra and Blade and Soul. Back when I first played both, you had so much to do in the open world, so much to explore, so many different quest hubs to navigate between, and so many quests to do that would contribute towards that level that you were working hard towards. Now both games have completely truncated leveling experiences, so you either just run the main story, as the XP is enough here that you don't need anything else, or you queue dungeons back to back while watching Netflix or YouTube videos. This is actually what the leveling experience has become in a lot of MMOs these days, and it's a little bit disheartening for me personally to know that the future of the genre is going to be based completely around instant gratification, which in my opinion is the complete opposite direction of where we should be heading. There's a reason that classic servers are all the rage these days. While classic doubled the game's population when they released it, Ion Classic is coming, Lineage 2 Classic. It's not just a passing fad, there are real genuine players that want to relive a time where the genre was in a much better place. To me, one of the most important facets of what makes up a perfect MMORPG is the journey. I want to be able to spend 100 hours, several hundred hours making my way through a beautiful world filled with amazing environments, expansive lore that provides a purpose other than, hey, here's a pretty area that you'll forget in like 5 minutes. I want to be able to go out into the world and feel like the zone actually matters, that there is some depth to it, that the content is actually worth doing as opposed to just skipping. I want to be able to group up with other players who are trying to make their way through the very same content. I want to talk with them, actually want to engage, other than just ignoring one another while spamming 1, 2, 3 and then auto-pathing to the next guy. I know that a lot of people still prefer the rush to endgame mentality, but that is one of the issues with the genre as it is currently. Speaking of story, of the lore behind each zone, if you've been watching this channel, then you would know that I am a huge fan of story in my MMOs, in my games in general. If the game lacks a clear, coherent story, then it is not going to hold my attention long term and I'm going to end up bored. I like to feel involved, I like to feel engaged, I like to have a sense of being a sense of importance in what I play, which is one of the things that I know a lot of gamers enjoy about single player games, right? You grow attached to your character, you grow attached to the story being told, and you want to see it through. This is one of the main problems that I have with most MMOs these days. But before we go any further, I do want to preface this by stating that I'm well aware that the story in most MMOs, even back in the early 2000s, was very, very poor. That is just an unfortunate side effect of being an MMO. You just have so much world to fill that quests ultimately end up being as simple as go out and kill 10 boars or go and loot 15 wolf teeth. Yet there are a few MMOs that have perfected their stories. Final Fantasy XIV and Guild Wars 2 are the first to come to mind, so it's definitely possible. To me, another facet that I find important to what makes a perfect MMORPG is the story. I like to know that there's a purpose to what I'm doing. I like to know that the characters I meet are going to have a continued presence throughout the course of the game. I like to bounce ideas of why I think what is happening, and then sit there discussing things with Mrs. Styx as we continue to watch things unfold. Story gives us a sense of progression, so we're not just leveling and equipping new gear for the sake of leveling and equipping new gear. We're doing it because we need to for the story to get stronger, to grow. Now we could stop here and we'd probably have a pretty good MMORPG, right? An MMO that is expansive, has a good story that involves you, that has you actually engaged in interacting in what is going on in the world, that has some basic PvPvE functionality, that doesn't rush you to endgame. To me, that sounds like a game I would probably play for a while. But there are a few other things that are integral to making a perfect MMORPG, to me and to everyone else. Freedom is one of the most important things an MMO can offer its players. While Final Fantasy XIV has proven that a restrictive linear leveling experience can definitely work for players, the opposite holds much truer in the majority of instances. Take WoW or Black Desert or Guild Wars 2 or even the Elder Scrolls Online, for example. All of the above provide you with a large selection of different areas you can level in, you can choose where you want to go, and then you pretty much just go there and start leveling. There are a plethora of different means with which to level, but at the same time, freedom doesn't merely pertain to having the freedom to level where you please, but more so to do what you please to complement the leveling experience. As an example, you don't need to level in Black Desert if you don't want to. There are so many life skills that you can invest into. I mean, heck, I see people fishing half the day or sailing around the seas. There's a housing system or just endless areas for you to explore if you wanted to. Mabinogi is an even better example of freedom in a game, providing you with the option of getting a part-time job. There are various different crafting professions to waste a day on. There's a real economy present. There are tons of life skills. Leveling is just secondary, I guess, to the sheer number of things you can do in that game. Providing players a variety of content to do in game outside of the leveling experience means that they always have a surplus of things to do, and that means that they have a variety of reasons to play, especially considering once you hit max level, you're stuck with whatever the game has left, right? Which is traditionally either dailies or dungeons and raids, which, are all great in their own right, but providing us the option of doing activities that aren't exclusively repetitious grinds is key to keeping an active player base with a variety of different interests. Then there's gameplay. Gameplay pertains to both the combat and the animations present outside of the combat. And I'm gonna be honest with you guys here, nothing disconnects me from a world more than watching my character lack basic motor functionality. Like graphics, combat is subjective. I know a lot of people believe that action combat, Black Desert Online's in specific, is by far the best combat achievable right now in an MMO. I'm also aware that games like Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft, both of which use a tab target combat system, are very popular worldwide. See, I've never been a larger fan of either combat type. I can enjoy tab target combat, I can enjoy action combat, heck, I can enjoy turn-based combat like the combat found in Atlantica Online. As long as the combat is done well, then it isn't really of concern to me what type of combat is employed within the game, but if it isn't of at least a certain quality, then I'll end up feeling detached. I don't need flashy effects that clutter my screen to enjoy the combat. I don't need 100 different abilities with each one having their own unique shortcut like left shift plus W plus A after double tapping the up arrow key directly preceding a successful parry upon taking damage. I don't think we necessarily require innovation in the area of combat either. I feel like there are various different games out there right now that do the combat very well, and if we use them as more of a benchmark going forward, we'll have some pretty good combat in our games. Graphics to me have never really been an issue at all. I enjoy anime MMOs. If you've ever watched any of our videos and you know this, I make it very evident, but at the same time, I love my 3D MMOs too. I'm not really very picky with how a game looks. I enjoy games that are much much older, and some of the most popular MMOs at present were made almost 2 decades ago, so I feel as though this sentiment is echoed from many other MMO players. Finally, the community. I played Tales of Pirates as my first MMO, and the community in that game was so competitive and toxic that I assumed that that was how most MMOs were. So moving to my second MMO, Perfect World, I had roughly the same mentality. And you know what? Perfect World had a pretty toxic mentality as well, being a PvPvE MMO, so for years I spent the majority of my MMO experience being a toxic ass, being of the firm belief that that was how MMOs generally were. However, after playing through other games like Final Fantasy XIV and Guild Wars 2 later on in my career, I learned that it is not the case. While toxicity could definitely be a prevalent part of the MMO scene, specifically to competitive PvP and competitive raiding, that is not what the bulk of the MMO community is like. Sure, there are some games where you just can't escape it, but I cannot begin to express how important having a friendly community is in an MMO. Seeing someone get killed in Guild Wars 2 and then having 3 different people run over to resurrect the poor guy was something that I'd never seen done before in a game. Seeing zone bosses down by coordinated attacks from groups helping one another, seeing higher level players help lower level players, it made me realize that that's kind of what I wanted out of an MMO I dedicated a large amount of my time to. And as such, I don't think it would ever be possible for me to go back to an MMO where there wasn't that same sense of camaraderie. At the end of the day, what I believe makes up the perfect MMORPG are several different key things. You need a leveling experience that takes time. You don't want to rush to endgame, as you will run out of things to do and be hit by a wall that ultimately ends up with you looking elsewhere for entertainment, for content to consume. You don't necessarily need PvP, but having PvPvE functionality provides additional things for players to do. This isn't just limited to PvP though. Having a wide array, a larger selection of content outside of the traditional run dungeons, grind raids, and do dailies. Freedom is important, and allowing players to play how they want is not only more enjoyable, but provides additional replayability. Providing a sense of identity in the form of a narrative is important to keeping you engaged in not only the world, but also the circumstance surrounding your existence within it. Story is important and integral to the overall growth of an MMO. Nobody likes a game with clunky gameplay mechanics. Making sure that your game plays to a certain level of quality is very important, and should be one of the first things that you work on. Graphically, whether an anime MMO, a 2D MMO, or beautiful 3D MMO, I don't feel like it's that big of an issue to me. I still enjoy games like Ragnarok Online and World of Warcraft after all. And finally, the community, one of the most important parts of the MMO genre. MMO does stand for massively multiplayer, right? Now, I'm well aware that the perfect MMORPG is something that is completely subjective to every individual player. Everyone has different likes and dislikes, right? Everyone likes different forms of combat, everyone enjoys different narratives and different forms of storytelling. No MMORPG is for every player, and as such, there will never be a perfect MMORPG. Nevertheless, that does not mean that we cannot continue developing our MMOs in the right direction. But that's just what I think. What do you guys think though? Let me know down in the comments below, and let's spark a discussion. That's what this video is for after all. Anyway guys, that is it for me. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Someday soon, I'm gonna make it. Yeah, all hard work's gonna be worth it. Ooh,